Hello and welcome to Fashion Futurum Forum. This is organised by the Russian Fashion Council. My name is Maeve Campbell and I'm Deputy Editor of Euronews Living, which is Euronews's environmental lifestyle platform. I'm delighted today to be here to host this discussion around sustainability in the fashion industry. It's a day-long conference with over 70 speakers and 17 sessions being broadcast both in Russia and internationally. So I'm excited to get started and introduce our panel. So first up, we have Carrie Summers. Carrie is co-founder and global operations director of Fashion Revolution in London. Secondly, Patrick Duffy. Patrick is founder of the Global Fashion Exchange and co-founder of Swap Chain and the Circular Fashion Summit. He's coming to us from Minneapolis in the USA. Next, we have Christina Dean. Christina is founder and chair of the Redress Design Award in Hong Kong. And next we have two people together, so Juan Pereira and Andres Jordan, who are both the designers of Juan de la Paz, which is a brand in La Paz, Bolivia. Next up, we have Daria Alexieva, who's coming to us from Russia. She is the director of the Vторое Дыхание Fund and member of Forbes 30 Under 30 top list of young entrepreneurs in Moscow. Lastly, we have Juliana Garcia Bello, who is the designer and founder of Garcia Bello and a graduate of the School of Architecture, Designer and Urbanism in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So thank you so much for joining me, everyone. Without further ado, I think we'll get down to our discussion today. We're going to be focusing the chat around sustainability and then also touching on COVID-19 and what the impact of the pandemic will do to the fashion industry coming up in future. So in order for this to be a free-flowing conversation, please do unmute yourself when you'd like to speak and don't be shy about chipping in if there's something you want to say to add on the end of someone else's point. So I'm going to start by asking a very simple question, which is, what is sustainability? I think it's a buzzword that's really thrown around nowadays, and it's really, a lot of people don't know what it actually means when it comes to fashion. So I thought we might start with Christina here, as I know you started Redress back in 2007, back when the term meant something different. Mm-hmm. So if you could tell us what sustainability meant then and how you think it's changed now. Sure.
Okay, so apparently there are 65 plus definitions of sustainability. Probably there's more. And back in 2007, when I started Redress, if I spoke about sustainability in a China context, which is where I was then based, literally, it was thought that it was green fashion that was the color of green. I kid you not, okay? Yeah, so fast forward 13, 14 years, and obviously huge increase in understanding and lots of boring definitions of sustainability. I'm going to give you one that I think is really good. It's not what you're expecting. And I'm actually borrowing it from Poland. And he said something along the lines of sustainability is the ability to think about future generations' needs ahead of our own greed. And I rather like that.
Wow. Yeah. I really like that. So is that a definition you would identify with yourself?
No, I mean, I think that's a philosophical sort of ethical consideration. But as it relates to more specifically, if we wanted a definition of sustainability in the fashion industry, if you want a more technical kind of, run of the mill definition, sustainable fashion, and please will you all argue and disagree with me, but the one that I use for sustainable fashion, it's fashion that's produced with minimal environmental impact and maximize positive social impact. So but that means so much. And in answer to finalize my answer to you, I think we probably all agree that it's wildly overused, it's completely understood, and it's also a really boring term. So that's why I gave very different definitions.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Would any of the designers disagree or have a slightly different definition? Perhaps Juliana?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. We can, yes. Hello.
Okay. I think in my case, the sustainability is a part of my life. Always, I think in this way is a big value when I receive with my family. It's very important thinking about the process in the fashion industry. Yeah, this I think is important to thinking about the values of the people.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that brings me on to the idea of ethics, kind of v sustainability, because I think a lot of brands tend to kind of use them both interchangeably. Do we think that, you know, ethics and sustainability are mutually exclusive? Obviously, ethics relates more to human impact, and sustainability would be more for the environmental impact. But do you think that it's possible for a brand to be ethical but not sustainable, or the other way around? Carrie, perhaps you have a view on this.
Yes, I mean, I'd like to think that ethics and sustainability should incorporate both the social and the environmental, and I think that's part of the problem, that for far too long we've seen the rights of nature and human rights as being separate, and we have to see them as being interconnected and interrelated. I mean, one example, I've just sailed 2,000 miles earlier this year in the Pacific to investigate microfiber and chemical pollution. And yes, we're seeing the environmental damage, but also what about the human health damage? Because we know that those are toxins and they're affecting human health, they're affecting our fertility, they're affecting our hormones, and that these will accumulate, they'll bioaccumulate for future generations. So I think it's really dangerous to separate out the two. I mean, I've certainly been to see fair trade factories with terrible environmental conditions, using like really shocking raw materials, not ones that I'm buying from, but as part of some of my fair trade research. So I mean, I think there certainly was that idea that you know, fair trade is about the social, and it's something I really fought for when I was part of the World Fair Trade Organization, was making sure that there was a really strong and credible environmental element to the new certification they were working on, and we have to see the two in balance.
Absolutely. I read that you were actually the first brand, your brand that you used to run was the first brand to be fair trade certified. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. I mean, back in 1992, I set up Pachacuti, which is still going. It's a sort of Panama hats, but also a lot of really beautiful artisanally made crafts. And Pachacuti back, I mean, well over a decade ago, traced our products right back to the GPS coordinates of where all of the raw materials are grown. And when you talk about sustainability, I mean, the raw material for the Panama hats, it's this amazing, it's called Coludophora palmata. And once the plants are established, which takes about 3 years, they can be cropped once a month for 100 years. They're grown in biodiverse plantations, they're organic, they don't need any extra water. So when I think about sustainable raw materials, and I think back at my history of sustainable raw materials, I've got a really high benchmark.
I bet. So this is quite a good moment to maybe talk a bit more about materials between us all. I don't know whether you want to talk, Juan and Andres, about the materials that you use and you know, why it's so important, for example, to stay away from polyester, and what upcycling and recycling can do to materials to make them more sustainable and have a longer life.
Well, actually, that's what we work on, and it's quite a subject because what we do is working with artisans, and they, you know, millenary have been knitting and weaving with natural fibers as alpaca hair. You know, and this whole thing was somehow sustainable in this whole industry, which is, you know, a huge industry, and somehow it gets involved with the fashion luxury system. And for example, this year with all this COVID context, maybe the view about how we treat animals and how we respect our natural sources has changed. And for example, us, we worked with alpaca hair in order to preserve our culture and the handcraftsmanship involved in there. And it's really important because the social impact here in Latin America is huge. 90% of the artisans are women. It's a millenary practice. But nowadays, we have to shift somehow our ethics and stop using maybe natural animal hair in order to produce with maybe organic cotton or upcycling choices. And it's a must by now, you know, even though we have this challenge of teaching the artisans how to use a new material in order to, you know, make this whole planet a better place. But we're willing to, you know, get that shift as a brand, because we believe we can, you know, go vegan somehow.
Yeah, that's exactly. This year we were trying with cotton, and we have other fibers like
garabata,
which is a plant.
And also we have this like pollution thing we receive lots of clothing as donations from United States or Europe, and here are resold in massive flea markets, and practically they cost nothing. But basically they do pollute a lot. So what we do is like we're sourcing material from there.
Yes.
And it's a great way, you know, to find a balance.
It is upcycling. I would think that we would take care of our planet and start recycling.
And that also provides artisans another perspective of what they can work on, because now they can embroidery on them, on the new textiles, they can also deconstruct them, and, you know, somehow it also preserves their culture and their craftsmanship.
That sounds like a really innovative approach. What would you say, designers and everyone, to someone who said we shouldn't be making anything new anymore? You know, even if it's coming from recycled materials and upcycling, you know, we should be wearing what we've got in our wardrobe. We should be living minimally in order to live in as sustainable a way as possible. What would you say to them?
Well, we think that it's an option, but it also has to, you can do it. You know, that's the new approach of luxury, we think. If you invest in a good coat that will last like forever, and you can heritage that piece, you know, and that will be part of your family history, and that will be part of who you are and your children and your grandchildren or so. I think that could be like the new, you know, challenge of fashion, like providing that kind of things. Like, for example, in our country, the native people do that, you know, they do beautiful garments. That's what they do, and they preserve it through generations. And that is something that we can learn from.
Yes, and we support totally this slow fashion, you know, say no to fast fashion. We start from that point. So yeah, that's exactly, it's so inspiring because you can see, you know, the Cholitas here in Bolivia, they are using the garments that their grandmothers do. So yeah, it is amazing. It's so inspiring.
Yeah. No, I really like the idea of tradition and investing in your future for, you know, an item that will be part of your heritage. Does anyone want to jump in here?
Yeah. I think, I hear that a lot as well when people say, you don't need to buy anything, you don't need to, what we don't need, and kind of break it down to the bare minimals and the bare basics of things. And I actually kind of did that about 5 years ago when I ventured really deeply into sustainable fashion and ethical fashion, or whatever we want to call it. So I kind of got rid of everything and whittled it down to about 40 items. And to be honest, it was a challenge because I was quite frankly a little bit bored. But then I remembered that I had, because I limited myself to only living with what I could fit in my suitcase. But then I remembered, I have clothing swaps. And then that kind of instilled the idea into me that we can still, fashion is, I think, a very important part of our lives in many ways, because it allows us to express ourselves. It allows us to educate and teach people about maybe different cultures. For instance, if I pick something up, or if I'm wearing a Pachacuti hat, I'm able to tell that story. If I'm in Bolivia, if I'm wearing, in Argentina or something like that. So I think it allows us to really be able to communicate in many different ways. So for me, it's not necessarily about, it's about how can we do that in a way where it's more, so to use the word sustainable, but more conscious and adds value and doesn't take away or deplete people or planet. So I think that right now is the challenge. So I kind of disagree with that. This is all you need, and you only need one shirt and one, because that's just so boring. Like, I don't think that that's what the fashion industry was built on.
Absolutely. And Daria, do you want to jump in here and maybe tell us a bit about the fund that you run? Because I know that's to do with collecting clothes from around Russia and distributing them to people in need. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Да, спасибо. Мне бы приятно очень, что
Yes, thank you. It's really a great pleasure to have so many foreign experts so that we can share different perspectives. So the recycling in Russia is not really developed. 2 million tons of clothes are wasted and, going to waste every year. So I wouldn't say that sustainability is really a trend here in Russia. We don't have a source for collecting clothes. Even if we have a technology to recycle or upcycle clothes, we don't have the collection system, the collection network. We still don't know where we can take the necessary amount of clothes. We don't have the right containers. We don't have municipal programs. And this is what our organization is trying to do. So you're asked what to do in this situation. We need to use the tools that we have. Currently, we'll be opening the first cafe in Moscow. It's in the first RFR cafe, and Moscow is has a population of 15 million. So it's a cafe where you can bring your clothes and we'll be able to mend your clothes. So I'd like to turn to Patrick and say that there are different ways of using clothes. You can wear them or you can present them as a gift. So we don't need to be looking for one brand that would, that would produce us an item of clothing from organic cotton for recycled something, recycled polyester. You can buy things from different brands. I used to wear some things that my father wore when he was a child. And, I'm telling my mom, that's what upcycling now means. And she was really surprised. So it's really could be part of legacy and it could be part of sustainable fashion, surprisingly.
That's amazing that you're passing things down from generations. That's really inspiring. And the cafe sounds great. I think we should all come visit soon.
Yeah.
Patrick, you'll be there.
Oh gosh, yes.
Absolutely.
So we really need to touch on, the COVID-19 pandemic. I wonder, you're all you're all heavily kind of in the fashion industry all day, every day, live and breathe it. What has the COVID-19 pandemic done to fashion? You know, I mean, there's been less carbon emissions with planes in the sky, with less planes in the sky, I mean. There's been quite a few kind of environmental impacts so far in 2020, but how has it affected the fashion industry specifically? Maybe Christina, you could start.
Sure. Always no pressure. I go first. I have a slight disagreement to first bring to the table, or maybe it's a challenge. And actually, it's something that I really learned during COVID. So I'm going to start with that, and then I'm going to disagree with some things that were said. But what was fascinating for me about COVID was that suddenly people stopped shopping. Mm-hmm. And it's been a catastrophe for the industry, for jobs across from the most at-risk, vulnerable people who are basically garment workers, as we know, of course, many of them female, to professionals, creatives. So look what happened when people stopped buying clothes. And that really taught me that it's not as simple as to say you shouldn't buy any clothes, you mustn't buy, only wear one coat for the rest of your life, because we have an economy that we need to sustain, and through that there's jobs, and that is sustainability. Maeve, I use the word disagree. I don't think with you, but I'm going to disagree with one of your opening comments, which I don't think is your opinion. But when we spoke at the beginning about the difference between ethics and sustainability, and I know that you made the assumption that many people do, that sustainability is the environment. But what I really learned, and I knew it already, but I really, really learned that sustainability is the environment, the economy, and the society. And COVID told us that, because you might, we saw when people stopped buying their clothes that what happened? People lost their jobs. And those people are at risk. And that proves to you the beauty of this industry. Yes, it's polluting, but it also is keeping people in employment. So I wanted to say with COVID, that for me was my biggest enriching, visceral understanding of what sustainability actually is. And therefore, I don't know that the answer is to stop shopping. We mustn't buy so much. And I realized that affects the economy, and of course it affects jobs. So I'm just adding how complicated it is. And then I'll say for me that that's what COVID has taught me. We're in a global community, a global economy, and sustainability is in there. And it's not simple to solve, as we've just experienced over the last, 6 months, 8 months, year.
Very interesting point, and I completely agree with you. Very important to define that, for our viewers as well, so that they really understand the true definition of sustainability and all that it engulfs. Patrick, would you like to jump in here?
Yeah, well, I think I agree with Christina. It's a very complex issue, and what it's really taught me is about how we need to stop looking at the old model to be the answer for the future. Because I feel like, I've been on so many different panels. We do consulting with many different companies, brands on supply chain or whatever it is. And I feel like we keep going back to this, it's a bit chaotic. We keep going, I guess that's the definition of chaos, right? We keep going back to a system and a structure that's created this massive issue, expecting or hoping that it's going to save us. And it's not going to save anything. So I think what's really important right now is understanding exactly what Christina said, is everything fits together. Sustainability really is about the harmony of people and planet, and not disrupting the processes that would, again, deplete. So, moving forward, I think it's important that when we're looking to build new models, which is exciting to be a part of, especially with these incredible panelists that are a part of this conversation, it's about making sure that the fashion industry is accountable and has transparency and accountability are woven into the new way forward, and understanding that there are many different ways and outlooks in which we can continue to have a thriving industry which promotes culture, promotes positive planet, positive, paying garment workers what they are worth, and all of those wonderful things. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We're actually coming to the end now already, but I think that's a really positive note to end on, the transparency and the accountability of the industry. And I'm sure that we all really hope that that will improve post-COVID. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And I hope that we get to speak again soon. And thank you everyone else for joining, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference today. Thanks very much.
Bye. I'm sad.
Bye. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.